Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Glendale campus of Midwestern University, remotely at least. I'm Melissa Flint. I'm one of the psychologists professors here at Midwestern in Glendale. And one of my areas of passion and expertise is actually grief, bereavement, death, dying. And in that, I have a certification called Certification in Thanatology, which is actually the study of death, dying, and bereavement. So that's why I've been tasked with having this chat today. And I'm so thankful to have one of our great students, Ashley McMillan, with me today. And she's going to field some questions, and we're just going to see where today goes. There is a chat box that you can put in questions, and as we're able to, we'll try and get to them in the next half hour or so, and Ashley will help watch that and make sure that questions kind of come through to me. So Ashley, where should we start?
Well, Dr. Flynn, I was thinking, kind of starting at why is this even important? Why is this something that we even need to discuss in a general basis?
Yeah. Grief in general, here's this shouldn't be a shocker, but it feels like a shocker to people. Of all the things in life, of all the experiences in life that we can have, the only one that is going to be completely universal is experiencing grief. And that might be grief of people we love, like physical loss, or it could be grief over the loss of our companion animals, or it could be grief over the loss of a dream. I think about divorces and ends of relationships. There's grief components to all those. For today, we're going to talk mostly about human, loss and grief, because that's what kind of rears its ugly head during the holidays in particular, because the holidays are full of expectation, aren't they? Like there's so much going on that it's supposed to be perfect, or it's supposed to be the way it always was. And when we have somebody missing, that especially when they were kind of a core piece, like I think of my grandma Doris. She was the glue that held our family together. And the first year that she was gone, we unfortunately, kind of in a not grief oriented family necessarily, kind of acted as if everything was just the same as it always was. And it didn't work well. None of us felt good about it. So we had to find new things to do. And so the holidays kind of shine a spotlight on grief when people are alone, when they're separated from people they love, either by death or by maybe proximity. There's so many nuances. And yet we're almost afraid to talk about grief, aren't we? Because we're supposed to be happy during the holidays. We're supposed to be X, Y, and Z. And what happens when you're just not those things because your heart is broken? A piece of it is literally missing. If we think about the word bereavement actually literally means to be torn apart and to have special needs. And if we act as if if we're not torn apart and don't have those needs, how is all this going to work out?
Mm-hmm.
So those are just some random grief thoughts, at least to get us started. That's important for so many reasons. Our hearts are broken when we've lost people, and that makes it
Absolutely.
important to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit when you're discussing it, but the holidays are perceived to be a very happy time. You're around family, you're doing a lot of things. So is it even appropriate or okay for people to be sad around the holidays? And if, we're leaning towards if it is, how can you express that in a way without feeling as though you're bringing down everyone else around you?
Yeah. Oh, there are so many sub questions and subtexts in that. So let me start here. I give you full permission as a human, as a professional, as a professor, as a psychologist, to be sad if your heart tells you to be sad. There's your prescription. Acting as if you are not something that at your core you are is not authentic. And it really doesn't matter whether the grief happened in July or December. It's the implication of the holidays that makes it different and demands different from us. So yes, if you are in a place of being a bereaved person, please grieve. Please openly mourn. A grief gone outward is mourning, and mourning is in fact the way we cope with grief. You have to mourn. And so if we are either subtly told by how we have kind of a grief averse society. Have you noticed, like, we don't like talking about this, especially this time of year, which I'm so thankful for Midwestern for being willing and able to talk about a difficult topic, especially now. So when we lose somebody, a piece of our heart has been torn apart. It's missing. And some people seek to fill that spot with lots of other things, new relationships, alcohol, drugs, gambling, anything to try and fill it. The fact of the matter is that hole will always remain the same, because that love doesn't change just because they're not physically here. That space still has to stay open. And if we try and fill it with joy or premature happiness, or I'm going to act as if they hadn't just died, it's just so inauthentic. So if we say, yes, I've been torn apart, there's a piece of my love story with this person that has a different slant to it than it's ever had before. My love story looks different. It does not mean your love story doesn't exist. Those are two very different ideas. If you act as if nothing happened, you're acting as if the love story never existed. Mm-hmm. That is inauthenticity at its brightest. So the people around us, and I think I've shared this in class probably, so this might be a reminder, a review as far as you've probably heard this. But if we look at our circles and if we have big loss, there's something called the rule of thirds. It's not really a rule, but it kind of ends up panning out this way. A third of the people in our circles are going to be supportive and there and let us be sad and let us grieve and not try and fix us, because there's nothing that we can do to fix it. It's a process. It's a growth living without the person, just like you were growing when you had the person here. So about a third will stick there, and you might be surprised at who's in that third of the helpers. Then you're going to have a third that are like, oh yeah, girl, I got you. I'll be there. And then they're like, where are you? And then a third will just kind of not show up at all. And sometimes the closest people to us fall in that third. And it is painful. It's a secondary grief, isn't it? It's another level of grief. And so not only am I sad about it being the first Christmas or first holiday season without my mom, for example, now I'm also sad that it's also the first Christmas without so many of my supporters that I thought would be there, but can't. Mm-hmm. When you learn which third your people are falling in, we need to adjust our asks of those people. I'm not going to ask my best friend who has kind of went MIA for support. I'm going to ask the people who have showed up and been there, right? And those people can often handle my sad. They're not trying to fix it. So that is such an important part of kind of this overall concept. We have to be comfortable with other people being appropriately sad, not inappropriate sad, but appropriately sad, like in the time of a death, and not trying to fix them with words, with platitudes, with forcing our belief system on them, allowing them to lead, because guess what? They are, in fact, the expert in themselves. I am not. Even with all these things hanging all over my walls, I am, in fact, not the expert in your experience. You are. So I'm going to companion you in your grief, and I'm going to hold you up and support you and not tell you what to do. Because I don't know about you, Ashley, when somebody's doing this to me verbally, you should just, I go, and like the head bobble will start. And I'm like, continue telling me, because I do not accept that. And
absolutely,
that's a good lesson. You don't have to accept everything given to you. You don't have to accept the platitude that God needed another angel to sing in his choir.
Right.
Guess what? I need my grandma, or I need my mom, or I'm going on a tangent. I'm not even answering your question anymore. We're just
I think it was really good, because really highlighting, just meeting that person where they're at. And one comment that has come up is this idea that death may have happened many years ago, but the holiday season is most likely going to bring up a lot of those emotions. And then kind of a follow-up question that I have with that is, how do you recommend supporting the person who's grieving at that time, but then for that grieving person, handling the guilt that might come up if they're going, oh, it's been 5, 6, 10, 15 years, and yet I'm still upset and triggered by Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, etc.
So if you're what I'll call stuck in your grief, it's been 10 years and you feel deeply in your soul that the pain is just as vibrant 24/7 as it was the moment you found about that loss, I'm going to actually encourage you to reach out, because that might be something that you need to really process with a professional. It goes beyond the scope of our grief supporters in our circles. If it though, who gets to put the timeline on when you're quote unquote over it? I'm going to argue that we should never say over it. I'm over my pneumonia that I had 5 years ago. It's as if I never had it. I will never say I'm over the death of my son. It's as if I never had him. Like, that just doesn't even make any sense. But that's what is being expected when we believe these platitudes or just kind of ways of talking about things, right? There's that subtle inference that you should be over it. But our society does that to us too, right? You get 3 days bereavement pay if you're lucky, and then you're on FEMLA where you might not get paid at all. And so we are not supporting society in being good grievers, good mourners, and actually doing the work of mourning. We are acting like we're in the McDonald's drive-through, and if you're not out of it in 7 hot seconds, someone has failed. And for the griever, often the implication is they have failed at grieving. So another component of this, and your question was so well formed, I want to make sure not to forget, your love story does not end because their life physically on this earth ended. And so people who 5 years from now sit with that box of ornaments that are the family ornaments, and they take them out, and there is a story with each and every one of them. Yeah. It's your love story. So if you can act like you never had a love story, well, I guess it's one way of coping. But more often than not, we find ourselves revisiting that grief and sitting with it for a moment, acknowledging. Please say their names, talk about them. I love the phenomenon of, if I just don't say his name, everybody will forget they died. That is not how it ever works. So let's just start being real and authentic. But to support people who are really feeling like they're kind of re-grieving again, there's something called grief bursts, and we should kind of expect them. Earlier on, they happen more often. Just out of the blue, something will kind of trigger, or I like the word activate us. Trigger is a difficult word for a lot of people, so it activates me. So when I see that box of family ornaments, I'm activated. So year one, we might choose not to do the box of family ornaments because it's just too painful. And that's a key in all this. We can choose what we're going to do and not do as far as ritual. And I know we're probably going to talk about that coming up. But this idea that things have to be perfect and just as they were before, a piece is missing. So the story of just as it was before is now, in fact, changed. And so it's okay to change how we cope with it. But if somebody in my circle says, it's just too hard this year to do Thanksgiving with the turkey because dad always cut the turkey, whatever the storyline for that person might be, have ham, do Thanksgiving on a different day, do Christmas dinner differently. It's okay to change it up, to honor your soul, to honor your grieving soul. We forget to honor our grieving souls. We act as if it's okay, and it's not okay. Our love story has been changed, but that doesn't mean the love story has ended. I think I kind of answered some of that, but again, I just get talking to you, Ashley, and here we are.
I think so. And you were kind of bringing it up, but this idea of, setting boundaries and following what's true for us, and really for people who are supporting those who are grieving, making sure that we're supporting those boundaries. But I think what ends up being a real difficulty is the person who's grieving, how can they then advocate for themselves and fight that urge to say, oh, but I have to attend this, or I need to go do that, when that may not be the best thing for them in that moment.
There's a couple components to that too. Kind of, it depends on if you're viewing it as I need to act as if this never happened. So we need to have the perfect holiday just like we've always had before. That's one phenomenon. And I'll just remind everybody that as you look at Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and all the other platforms, those perfect holiday pictures probably had 27 takes because there was chaos and yelling and screaming kids, and somebody dropped a pie and somebody showed up late. So now everything's cold. So this idea of perfection, it was never perfect to begin with. So can we let that one go? Like, it is what it is. David Kessler talks about let the day be the day, just whatever that is. And that's okay. It's not, you're not dishonoring anybody. You're actually honoring reality, honoring what is. So kind of let go of that pressure. We don't need to pretend and do exactly as we've always done before. There's so many components to this too. With the boundary situation, the closer you are to the grief, let's just say you're year one. This is the very first year that you're experiencing being an orphan. Mom and dad have both died. Like, let's just pick a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for the grieving person to say, I'm not sure I can come to that event. We often say yes right away. So Ashley, if you invite me over, you know that I've lost mom and dad this year. You're very sweet about it and just say, oh, I just, really want to make sure that you're not alone this Christmas. I should be able to say to you respectfully, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do that day. I so appreciate your offer. And if I can, I will be there. And if I can't, I appreciate that you've asked me. But if we just say yes under the pressure because we should say yes, then we end up feeling guilty because I didn't go and here you made all this stuff. And it just makes it muddies the waters. Say what you need. Here's another permission slip for y'all. Any of you grieving, you can say what you need. And no thank you is actually a full and complete sentence. And we as grief supporters, when somebody tells us no thank you to come to the event or come to the kids' play or insert whatever you tend to do during the holiday season, honor that no thank you. Because what we tend to say is, oh, come on, it would do you good. You would feel better if you went to mass. And we insert our grief coping onto them. And I'm an expert in my grief. You're an expert in your grief. And so what works for me might not work for you. And so I want to give space for that as well. So give yourself permission to say no. And it's okay to be sad. And the grieving person gets to lead. They've earned that role. They're going through it. And so boundaries are really important. Do what speaks balm to your soul as the griever, especially during the holidays. And that's going to look different for every single person, but just know you have permission to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So really looking at what that person's actually asking for and truly respecting any boundaries that they may be setting and not wanting to push them, which kind of leads me into another question that I do think is really important to highlight. But if we're wanting to help someone who's grieving, where's that line with how forceful do we need to be? Because there's also that flip side of I've known people that do want comfort, that do need time, but because they don't want to be a burden, their first instinct is to say no.
Yes.
And so how do you kind of balance that of I want to be there. I am that 1/3 in your circle who's wanting to be there for you, but I also am trying to respect those boundaries that you're setting.
Yeah. Let's start having some open conversations about that with one another, right? Because society has taught us no matter what happens, if my dad died yesterday and I go to work today because that's what I'm supposed to do, and everybody goes, oh, how are you doing? I say I'm fine because that's what I've been taught to say. That's not how I'm feeling. I am broken inside. I'm dying. But we say things that are inauthentic. So I want you as mourners to start being authentic. Ask for what you need and be honest. Today is a hard day. Today I'm struggling a little bit. Okay. Then that allows the people that are the true supporters, not the voyeur supporters. Those people are different. The voyeurs want to be involved in any crazy that's going on. Those are not your true supporters. That's like expecting everybody to mourn with you on Facebook or something, right? By hitting clicks and condolences. And honestly, as supporters, we need to resist that. Anytime I see like somebody post a sad face or the care icon or whatever it is on all the different platforms, I cringe a little bit because it doesn't absolve you of your responsibility as a fellow human to that person that you care about to also support in other ways. If a person is really shut down, I'm going to encourage you to still invite them, allow them to say no. And then maybe the interaction of support is, you know what? I have 2 hours on Saturday. If it's okay, between 2 and 4, I'm going to come over and I'd love to just clean your house and get the laundry done for you. You can stay in your room. We don't even need to talk. Or Friday night at 5, I am going to deliver pizza to your doorstep. And you don't even need to answer the door. Just know it'll be there and that I love you and that I see you. And if there's anything else I can do, because we often tell, what can I do for you? The grieving person often doesn't even know because you've not been in that space before necessarily. And so just doing really human, beautiful, caring things is a place to start. And the mourner, hopefully the person who is grieving can really say this was helpful or this wasn't helpful, and then we can adjust. I love the story of a friend of mine who, well, I don't love it. It points out the problem with this. A different faith base than their friend who had the loss. And they kept leaving like religious pamphlets at their door. And it was not where their friend was. And it actually became something that hindered their relationship and broke their relationship instead of helping and being supportive. And support can look like lots of different things. Support can be, can I pick up the kids from school? Can I pick up holiday gifts for your family so that you don't need to worry about it? Just give me the list. It doesn't need to be that face-to-face, I'm hugging on you, we're all going to ugly cry. And some people might not be comfortable with that. So broaden your concept of what support is and then be available. That's some of the best places to start.
Right. And kind of, you're bringing it up a little bit, but with the holidays, there is a very large tie to religion.
Yeah.
And for individuals who are grieving, that can bring up a lot of emotions, a lot of maybe even mixed emotions when they're used to holidays looking a certain way and having a faith base and then that adjusting. What are your kind of recommendations for navigating that, or what have you seen in terms of people coping with holidays, especially when it's been more of a religious event?
If that is an important concept for them, note that their feelings about their religion could change. Some people dive into their religion and it gives them a great deal of peace. Some people do not. They're even angry at the higher power that they believe in for allowing their child to die. Yeah, and that's okay. I think we need to remember that religion and belief is between the person and their maker, creator belief system. It's not about your introject of what they should or shouldn't be doing. And that is a line that we cross a lot. If you just prayed more, God would absolve you of your feelings of grief. It's actually not how it works. That's equivalent to, when you see those things on social media where it's like, if you don't pass this along, your God's not going to bless you or you're not going to get healed. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. But, thanks for the internet fun. Be authentic. It's okay if you're struggling with your faith. Talk to your faith leaders, whoever those people may be, if that brings you comfort. If it doesn't bring you comfort, particularly early on when the religious component is often so interconnected with burial and funeral and services, on top of the Christmas holiday influence as well, it's okay, again, to even do religion a little bit differently. Maybe you don't want to go to church or mass or synagogue and that, again, between the person and their faith base, not your introject of what you think is going to make them feel better. That's a pretty presumptuous thing we tend to do to people, and it's out of our own discomfort. It's not really with the intent. Well, the sub-intent is to have the person mourning feel better, right? That's the sub-intent. But the real intent is, if I can just tell you something to help you relieve your pain, God forbid when I'm in that same situation, my pain will also be relieved. There's that subtle weirdness that kind of is being transferred. And that's, again, just not the way it necessarily works.
And with that, you brought it up, the comment earlier when we were talking, but people have a tendency to kind of make those more religious-based statements of, oh, God needed another child, needed another angel in heaven, things like that. And so it sounds like maybe you can expand on that a little bit more, but really being mindful of what that other person is saying, and that those statements can actually do a lot more harm than good at times.
Yes. So one I heard very frequently after my son's death, and even for years later, I had an infant die. And I can't tell you how many well-meaning people would say things like that. You know, he only chooses, one of my favorite was something like, your God will only give you as much as you can bear.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, that kind of makes him a serial predator. I don't believe that's what this is about. Like, he's just looking for people that seem strong and he's gonna be like, I'm going to take your kid. I don't think that's how it works either. And so when you really think about the wording, the at least, no grief support should begin with at least. For example, oh, your son died. It must be a tough Christmas for you. At least you have your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, while accurate, while factually accurate, my heart is screaming and I'm missing my son.
Mm-hmm.
And I have every right to that component of it, right? So platitudes in general are just dangerous territories. But again, we don't have these conversations. So people don't often know that that's not the comforting thing to say, unless either they were the griever who was given platitudes. I don't even know how to say that. And then they recognized it didn't feel good. But
Right.
we also don't have conversations about, if you want to really support somebody, say, I love you. I'm so very sorry. Talk to me about Robert. Tell me a holiday memory about your time with Sarah. Use their names. We don't forget the person existed when people cease to use their names, especially in the death of children. That's a big phenomenon with child death. Is like, shh, if we don't say it, they won't remember. Every cell of your body remembers. Every cell of your body remembers at times. And as you grow in your grief, as you grow around your grief, that's a kind of a visual that I'll give people. We used to, if your grief is this big, if the size of the piece that they had in their heart is this big in your heart, we kind of used to think, well, the grief will shrink, right? And as you get over it, this is inaccurate. This doesn't happen. The space they held remains the same. We grow around it. So that's why I say I don't heal from grief. I don't get over grief. I accommodate with it and move forward with my grief, because it has changed me. It's fundamentally changed me, as it should, because the love story is that darn important.
Mm-hmm.
It should change you. If you feel different after you've had a grief experience, yay you. Yes, you should, because that's how much you loved. That's the expression of how much that meant to you. Now, flip side, and for you as a psychology student and people other listening, sometimes these relationships are very complicated, right? What happens when you lose the father who was also your abuser? Ooh, guess what? Permission to be mad, permission to be angry, permission to not accept condolences that imply the sainthood of those who have passed. Permission to, do you know that we can all, and I need to practice this more, we can all choose what we accept and not accept. So when somebody comes up to me in my grief and says, oh, your mom would be so proud of you. Yes, she was. And I desperately miss that she's not here in this moment to express her pride in me. I don't accept that. Like that's not balm to my soul. Now I might say that out loud if it's the right time and I feel that, or I might just say that in my head. Yep, nope, that's not one I'm going to accept. And start, boundaries are with others, and boundaries can be with what we feel like we just need to absorb, that we really don't need to absorb, if that analogy makes sense.
Absolutely. And a couple of questions that have come up, and I think one that a lot of people are really looking to hear from you from is this idea of what are the tools, what are the strategies that we can use if we're grieving during the holiday season. I know just working with you, a lot of it is going to be staying true to you and what you
Yes.
need. But in general, what would you say for people who are looking for those avenues of how do I get through the holidays when
Yeah.
I'm feeling the way I am?
Yeah. I talk a lot about setting the intention of, if you set the intention of perfection, it's going to fail 100% of the time. So, welcome to that reality. But also set the intention that I acknowledge this is going to be hard because my love story has changed. But hard does not mean insurmountable. Different does not mean fail. Different just means different, and that it can be different, and I will find ways to cope, and each year that passes, those coping mechanisms might change a little bit. But I really like Alan Wolfelt's idea. Alan Wolfelt is a psychologist out of the Fort Collins, Colorado area with the Center for Loss and Life Transition. And he has been an incredible mentor to me. And he talks, particularly even this season, he just did a holiday video, if you want to look it up, talked about cherishing. And cherishing does not mean ignoring. Cherish literally means to protect and hold dear. I am going to protect and hold dear this love story this season. And that looks like this for me. It looks like I want to cook all the things my mom used to love. It looks like I don't want to cook all the, literally, you're the expert in you. Let people know what feels good to you and what doesn't feel good. And in that space, there's often others that are close that might have a completely different take on it, right? I don't want to cook mom's famous pie, but they want to. Okay, you can do that, and I won't do that. And there's some delegation there that can come. But I think you hit the nail on the head in how you ask the question. Be mindful of what is meaningful for you. And honor that, and as much as you can make that happen. Sometimes we can't, and it's just we fall through the day sometimes and just get through it, and then back to Kessler's idea, just let the day be the day. If you don't go caroling, guess what, it's okay. And kind of letting yourself off the hook is a really good thing. Saying no, like I've said, um, and really don't make any assumptions about what people are comfortable with and what they're not. Have those family conversations, especially around the holidays.
I think what I would add on too is, as a psychology student, if you are feeling that grief and it is that intense emotion around this time, even asking for help, going out and seeking a psychologist, a therapist, a counselor, whoever fits with you, so that you're receiving that support from someone who is able to support you appropriately, especially at this sensitive time.
Yeah. A lot of people look online for their support because it's convenient. And there's a place for that, but I kind of look like at social media as an announcement venue, not necessarily a support venue. So look for your support in ways that make sense for you. Some of those may be faith-based, some of those may be college counseling centers, some of those might be seeking a psychologist like myself. There's lots of resources in everybody's communities. You can certainly see the psychological associations in the states where you're at, and look for resources. There's tons of resources online as well. Things like Holiday Grievers Bill of Rights. You have the right to do it differently. You have the right. It's not you being stubborn or silly or inconsiderate of other people. It's literally you have the right to mourn the way you need to mourn. Now, my caveat, if it doesn't hurt you or doesn't hurt others, of course, behaviors that have those propensities are ones we want to stay away from, clearly. But really, for the most part, anything else, you have the right to do this holiday the way that is authentic and speaks to your soul. And we need to start giving people the ability to do that instead of dictating for them what must make them feel better. That rarely works. That's like the finger, like you should do this. I just, again, kind of recoil from that, but we're metaphorically doing that when we demand that another grieve in a specific way.
And such a big component of that is even having these conversations like this, normalizing that grief process and making it to where more people are aware that this is a heightened issue and that's okay. There doesn't need to be some sort of immediate solution from that. I think a lot of people want that, as you put it, that you need to calm that storm. If I feel better, you're going to feel better. And that's not something that has to occur at this time.
And another component of that, you just made me think of it, was this idea that we must say the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's not any right thing to say other than I love you or I'm here for you. There was no sugar-coated, sprinkled rainbow glittery unicorn that could have fixed the first holiday after my son died.
Mm-hmm.
All I wanted was to be being mother to him.
Mm-hmm.
People who tried to use words often ended up being hurtful instead of helpful. And again, I'm so thankful for Midwestern to be able to be willing to have a difficult conversation like this, because it really does go against the flow of what we're taught in society. Smile, say you're fine, act as if everything's great, and don't burden anybody.
Mm-hmm.
There's something called the proper sorrows of the soul. Grief is a proper sorrow of the soul. And the only way to sorrow, as a verb, sorrowing, is to grieve, to mourn, and be allowed to do so.
Mm-hmm. Right. As we're kind of wrapping up here, one other question that I wanted to make sure that we highlight is any helpful hints for students who are working with individuals who may be grieving this holiday season? Anything that we as students should be really mindful and aware of?
Yeah. So the beautiful part about training all you future psychologists is being able to share these nuggets with you. And I would say, if you are a helper, whether you're a student helper, a lay helper, or a psychologist or therapist already working, and you're listening to this recast or the cast right now, you need to take a space of humility. Grief work, holiday or not, but especially during the holidays, is about companioning people, not dragging them. And a lot of philosophies, a lot of people believe in the dragging. I will bring you to healing if I kill you doing it. Not all that helpful. So take a stance of humility, that they are an expert in their experience. How do you support them in what feels right for them? Tons of really great resources, but vet them. Things like grief.com is a great one. Center for Loss and Life Transition, great one. There's many other. Megan Devine's websites are amazing about honoring grief. Be careful about like Bob's backdoor webpage about how you should grieve. Like, look at respectable sources when you're trying to gain knowledge. Ask your mentors, sit down with them and say, hey, I have this patient who, and talk through it. There's many great resources online as well. So expand your knowledge and get out of the discomfort that you need to fix them. Because again, you are not the magic unicorn. You are a companion. And if you sit with them and let them tell the story, their love story, remember their love story continues, let them tell that love story. That, in fact, is grief therapy. That's grief work. And what a beautiful thing to honor, and again, get to that idea of cherish during the holiday season, to hold, to protect that memory of your time with them, and also cherish the parts of you that are very broken because that person's not physically in your life any longer.
Mm-hmm. What you're really highlighting, at least from being a student who's honored to be taught by you, is really that therapeutic silence and holding that space. And having done a little bit of grief work and having that experience, it truly is the most honorable thing that you can do for that person in that moment. I found in my personal experience that not enough people are just doing exactly as you say, just sit there, let them tell their story. And there are no perfect words to say. That's okay. Just you being there can be sufficient and can be therapeutic.
As a future therapist, I hope you flash in your head on what undoubtedly I've said a million times in different classes, but you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Use them in proportion. You should be watching and honoring and listening and honoring more than you're yapping and not honoring, because that's often what ends up happening is we muddy the waters out of our discomfort out of us not knowing how to just share that sacred space. That sacred space is healing. And if we can't ever get there because nobody will just sit with us and companion us there, grief becomes kind of a monster in the corner ready to attack at any moment,
Right.
versus something that we learn to accommodate to based on the love story that has now changed, that isn't here in physical presence.
Right. Dr. Flint, thank you so much for going through this. It has been amazing to sit here with you. As we're wrapping up, what would you say are the kind of key takeaways? What do you want people to really remember and take home from this conversation?
Have the intention, set the intention of being a helper and not somebody who hurts another. Remember that they are the expert, that you can follow their lead, and that is in fact support. You can't take away the pain of what they've gone through. And for the griever, be true to yourself this holiday. Don't play the roles that everybody expects necessarily unless that fits for you. If that is balm to your broken soul, do it. If it's not, it's okay to change it and to make your ritual something different. Because in honoring yourself and honoring your grief, you are honoring the love story of whomever you've lost. And what greater way to hold them up in a very important season of the year than to just sit with and look at the life that you were different because of their presence, and also the life now that's different because of their absence.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Flint. This is fantastic.
Thank you. See you in class. Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here.